Was born in Happy Valley, 22nd Street, my grandparents' house. And I was born June the 4th, 1926. I weighed 12 pounds. I was just a small little boy. My father and mother were born in the city of, my mother in the town of Whatcom County, and my dad Fairhaven. My Tweit relatives came from Norway in 1889. They came by train across Canada. There were still no trains here in Fairhaven. And then they had to come by boat down to Fairhaven. My mother's families, the two families in that case, the Muldrum family had come from Norway and to the Midwest, and then came here in 1898 to Fairhaven. And then my Peterson relatives, who were Swedish, my great-grandfather had worked for Alamo Bell, and his first wife was killed in the explosion, and so Al later took him in a ship to come to America, and he went to Minnesota in 1899. He came to Fairhaven, and so all our families came from Scandinavian background. When I was 5 years old, we moved in the house that I'm still living in. Most of our time was together, and then on Sundays we would always get together as groups, one side of the family or the other, and we'd all have a meal, usually chicken that was raised by us and so forth. And we as the kids learned to play at simple things, because you couldn't afford the more expensive things.
What I remember about the Depression isn't until I was about 5 years old when we moved into the house on Donovan. What was neat about the new house was I had my own bedroom with my sister, and Gordie had his own bedroom. We didn't have toys as such. We had to create our own, and my brother was especially creative in terms of, I think he even made a wagon once.
Life was pretty interesting for me, because I was always going someplace, digging someplace, but we would have a lot of fun. When we first got there, I climbed the fence and used to sing Onward Christian Soldiers,
Yeah.
and all the things I had to use in there were somebody had owned it before us. In other words, if you had a baseball glove, you got it from your uncle. If Eloise needed a dress, she got it from her aunt. And so there was very little things. And when you did get something, you cherished it. You didn't even want to let go of it. I got a dart game once in my Christmas in that little room that she talked about. And they wore the center of it out with the darts before I ever played with it.
But we had to create our own fun. So we used to play kick the can a lot.
Going to high school was a thrill to me, and I love science, so I took all science courses and chemistry courses and so forth in high school. But also, I went to work here in the Fairhaven Pharmacy as a delivery boy. We had our graduation there at high school. We all knew we were going to be in the service, and the next day we got notices that we were to report in on June the 6th, 1944, to boot camp in Farragut, Idaho. Eventually went on the USS Rapidan 8018, was an oiler that was in Alaska. Our task force had 3 cruisers and maybe 8 destroyers. I had a great time in pharmacy school. The classes were what I liked. In 1952, I graduated from pharmacy at the University of Washington, and in doing so, I immediately came back to work at Fairhaven Pharmacy, and was within a short period of time getting to know all the people that were here, a terrific number of Croatians, and it was so much fun to be around them. I had to learn the fishermen's boats and so forth because they charge and so forth. So you got to really know your customers and the older people who depended upon you and so forth. And it was just a wonderful way of living. And I started taking pictures in 1964 of all the kids. It was a wonderful life with all these kids. I mean, it was just thrilling, and we'd put them in the window and pick them up. But today, the sad part is, Rob is doing it the last 2 years, but they all have cameras and they take their own pictures, so half of them don't come back and pick the pictures up again.
I moved to Fairhaven when I was just before I was 3 years old. And there were very few stores, very few places where children could go. Lots of taverns, lots of boarded up buildings. But Fairhaven Pharmacy was a very welcoming place where everyone in that part of the city gathered. Gordie loved our community history, and he loved to make it and record it. So every Halloween, after you were done trick-or-treating, you went down to Fairhaven Pharmacy, you stood up in a little row, and you got your picture taken by Gordie. And then the better thing was he put them up in the window, so then other people could see all the costumes and all the kids. In 1966, I was the Lost in Time Queen. And from that day forward, every time he sees me, he calls me Queenie.
I got more interested in picture taking, and ever since then I have taken thousands of pictures from every kind of subject matter, buildings going up, buildings going down, sea to ski, the kids running when they were from high school, grade school with a liquor and so forth, all those things. I mean, and, it's just been my life.
Gordie has always been an important part of Fairhaven. I can remember from 30-some years ago, he was always walking around the neighborhood with his camera. He caught everything that happened in the neighborhood. He has quite a collection of photographs, of course, but one of the collections that's really interesting, he has a collection of photographs of everything that has happened at the corner by the pharmacy, of people turning and losing loads of fish or paint or whatever. And I don't think anybody else has that kind of collection of things that have happened in Fairhaven.
This is the beginning of my restoration of my project down here. And I had one of my employees' husband build this for me. so that I can show you these old apothecary bottles. They date back to 1890s when the store opened. When Eric Johnson retired in the Herald building, he was about 90 years old when he retired. And he called me up and says, "Gordon, get your ass down here. I'm going to give you some stuff." He says, "The museum didn't want it, so I want to give it to you." So I went up and two of my Shirkdale cousins helped me bring these down and clean them up. They're old instruments, everything from masks to birthing forceps to tonsil cutters to shock machines. So, and then I have a bunch of them here that are maritime books also. That's one of my favorite things are that. Here's Pacific Tugboating, and it tells you all of the, you want to know about tugs that went through the Everett, Bellingham, Seattle, and Alaska. These are a whole bunch, maybe much more than 60 of books of Whatcom County, and this is just one for news, and this is done by my friend Rosamond. She did lots of them. This is the last one, Chronicles of Bellingham, old newspapers, and she's got all these things listed in here, but she's done them on the hotels, she's done them on the buildings. This picture here is a picture of downtown Bellingham in the center. It goes out to the bay and out towards the county. And Mr. Corbett, who never owned a car but was quite a photographer, did this picture. And this picture here is of Happy Valley, as we call it, because of the Irishmen, the three Irishmen that settled the area. And this is where my family all came. And this picture shows the valley floating out here. Up here would be the freeway today as it goes through, and this would be the parkway coming into Fairhaven. This section here of salmon label varied from about some copy ones from 1900 up to 1970s. And my first interest in that, in the summertime, I'd work in the warehouse where we labeled salmon. You want to notice that whenever you see a salmon with its tail up, that's a healthy salmon. But if you see one with its tail down, that's an unhappy salmon. It's sick. But the people who were drawing it wouldn't know that. So a lot of them drew them with the tail down. So
oh, wow.
it would probably keep some people from buying the product.
Yeah.
This is my camera section. They're not all here. I have more of them. I have over 100 cameras dating from 1905 on, and different lenses and so forth. And of course my interest in there, we couldn't afford it when I was a kid. So they were so expensive that a roll of film, you took about one roll a year. And but when I came to work here, I decided the thing I have to do is buy myself a 35mm camera and a movie camera so that I can learn to use them. And when people come in, I can give them the right answers to what they need with their cameras. This is one of my favorite cameras. It belonged to my marriage great uncle Charles Bevington, and he used it in his real estate business for a long time. And here's the different plates that you take out and put in the back of the camera to shoot it with. And one of the things I like, this little device right here, is for parallax. When you're shooting a building or something, usually it will be at an angle when you're looking at it. So you adjust that with this.
When I graduated from college, my first job was the dish pit at Dos Padres Mexican restaurant in the George Finnegan shopping tower, and I shared a wall in that basement with Gordie's museum and his pharmacy. And yeah, I've known Gordie over 20 years, and we have some many common loves. Of course, Bellingham history, and more than just history, community itself, knowing the past, but the past being alive, so it's more interactive than what people might imagine. So we can talk about events that happened 70 years ago that seem like they happened last week. So we jump around in time quite a bit. So I guess we're kind of like common time travelers, and we have a lot to talk about.
Well, Gordie Tweit has made a terrific contribution to the history of this community, of the collection of the history of this community. He's, of course, had the advantage of being maybe the third generation, at least the second generation of his family that's lived in Fairhaven. And he had the great advantage of being a delivery boy for the drugstore. So from a very young age, he was visiting all the notable families on the South Hill, and he knew the Donovans and the Larrabees and everyone that you could imagine. And he collected all kinds of wonderful information. When I was curating the museum show on the life of J.J. Donovan, I went to Gordie to see if he had a good picture of Donovan. And he came up with a marvelous portrait that nobody had ever seen before. The best picture of Donovan that we had, and we used it as a central feature as you walked into the exhibit.
When I painted the Fairhaven mural in 2000, Gordie would come by daily and take pictures and post them at the Fairhaven Pharmacy. In 2013, when I refurbished the mural, I decided to paint Gordie life-size in his Norwegian sweater with his camera in front of the pictorial of old Fairhaven.
Gordie is the kindest man in Fairhaven from my point of view. He is Fairhaven. I published a magazine about Fairhaven's history, and I could go to him at any time when I needed questions answered. He was a great help for the magazine and for everybody here. We love him.